Good afternoon and welcome to Patriot Pets. My name is Lake Green and today we are visiting Washington Crossing State Park, the very location where General Washington and his 2,400 man force of the Continental Army crossed the Delaware River from Pennsylvania on Christmas night of December 25th, 1776 and marched through the cold, miserable roads and the snow to Trenton, New Jersey, down the road from here a ways, and won probably what is the most incredible victory of American history. So this is the Johnson House. It's a ferry house, and it was operated at the time of the battle as a ferry service across the Delaware River, which is behind me. And on the night of December 25th, Washington's men crossed from the Pennsylvania side across the river there and assembled right down here behind this road, which is called Colonial Lane. And Washington himself and his generals, Nathaniel Greene and General Sullivan and others, used the house as a staging point. Without further ado, we'll check the rest of the park out. So as I said in a couple weeks videos ago, I said in my first 8 minutes to educate that on December 8th, 1776, Washington successfully completed his hasty retreat through New Jersey from New York and crossed the Delaware River. That was when they were pursued by the British through New Jersey, and the British knew where they were because of the blood on the road. But here at this point, right on these grounds, General George Washington, after losing New York to the British, led his rebel army in retreat through New Jersey, and on Sunday, December 8th, 1776, crossed the Delaware River into PA. He commandeered every single boat. Yes, Washington and his army took every single boat on the New Jersey side of the river and used it to cross. Not only to use it for all of his men and his food and his supplies and whatever he had, but also to ensure that the British did not have any boats on this side of the river to follow them, so they could get there, cross the river, and not have anybody pursue them. Directly at this point, near the Pennsylvania shores, the island behind which Washington hid the Durham and the ferry boats for his return on Christmas night. And because of this daring victory, the Continental Army restored the ebbing spirit of the colonies in their struggle for independence and paved the way for the ultimate victory at the war 5 years later in Yorktown of 1781. So we lose here, there's no country. We win here, and we saved the cause of independence and renewed spirit in the fight for liberty. So you might imagine that it was a freezing cold night here at this time, and indeed it was. It was in the middle of a blizzard. You know, the temperature of the country at the time was actually about 3 degrees colder on average, and during that time was actually a little ice age in the world. So notoriously, Washington's men were not as comfortable as me and my colleague here are today filming. It's 57 degrees here, a beautiful December day, but imagine this, let's say about 2 weeks from now, 244 years ago, it was freezing cold. There was ice over the Delaware River. It was frozen. Men were wearing no shoes and in rags, miserable, and General Washington, to ensure secrecy, made sure that no fire was allowed. So we, as I said, are on the location of the Johnson Ferry House. Mr. Garrett Johnson operated a 490-acre ferry landing, and it was his business that he would funnel passengers to and fro across from the Delaware, New Jersey side of the Delaware River to the PA side. And it was here on that night that General Washington took his force of 2,400 troops. They marched up from the boats and waited in the cold, freezing cold outside, and Washington and his generals had the luxury of being within that house. And that's that, you know. These men were in such a terrible state, you know, of mind, of body. There was no food. They were freezing. They're wearing summer rags, and yet, in the middle of an icy cold blizzard, snow falling, ice in the river, freezing, unbearable cold, changed American history forever. All right, so this house is This house dates to 1740, and the design is actually Dutch in origin. If you look at this roof here, this is called the gambrel roof, a gambrel design, and that originated in the Dutch Republic. This is Dutch architecture, and New Jersey was of course settled by the Dutch before the English took control in the mid 1600s. You have a central chimney, 2 windows, 2 doors, a cellar door, and around the side of the house is a garden kitchen. So obviously back then there's no supermarket. You're kind of living off the land, and it was commonplace that most colonial houses would have herbs and small vegetables to be grown within the home. Johnston Ferry House operated as a ferry landing and a ferrying service during the time of the battle. And there is the Delaware River, where Washington's men ferried across in a freezing cold blizzard and changed American history. So as I stated earlier, today it's a comfortable day. It's a December, whatever, 12th, 13th, whatever it is, something like that. I lost track. But it's about 2 weeks to the time when these men crossed. And it's 57 degrees today. It's a beautiful day. I'm comfortable here in this clothing. But the night of December 25th, Christmas night, when these men crossed at this location, it was a blizzard. And over 2 feet of snow fell that evening, or in the aftermath of the entire storm. It was in the 20s. It was freezing cold. There was ice in the river. And these men had no shoes and were wearing rags. To fathom the amount of courage it would take for them to march the 9 miles down the road to Trenton in that direction is almost impossible for us to do in modern standards. And this, perched on this hill here, is the view of the Delaware River, where on Christmas night, with 2,400 men, artillery and supplies, they crossed and marched 9 miles to attack the Hessian state at Trenton, and was the most important victory in American history. Because without the victory that night, we wouldn't have a country. The war would be over. Remember, in just 5 days or 6 days time, on January 1st, 1777, most of those men, their enlistments would expire, and there would be no army. So the point is Washington knew that if these men did not attack and achieve a victory then, the entire cause of independence and the war would have been over, and we would have never had the United States. So while many historians and military figures could debate on what is the most important victory in American history, what was the most lasting moment, I'd say undeniably it's Trenton, New Jersey in 1776. In the final days of that year, when almost all hope was lost and almost every little ember of the cause of independence was diminished and stifled, these men committed a miracle victory and only lost a couple men. Only a few were wounded, and the only ones to perish in the action were those who froze to death on the march. As Nathaniel Greene said, "It is very dark, but I surely hope that we are in the period of the night where the darkest part of the night is right before the dawn." And that's what Nathaniel Greene said, and he was absolutely right, because after Trenton, America was never this close to defeat, and never again did we come this close to disintegrating. Because of these men, we have a beautiful country and the freedom that we enjoy today. We must always remember them. Thanks so much for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week on Patriot Pants. My name is Lake Green.